Hello, this is Eastern Europe Review, the program that is mainly about Belarus, Russia and Ukraine. This is a common project of Belsat TV and TVP World. My name is Sergei Pelesa. Please take a look at the stories that we have prepared for you today. The media report that the Ukrainian authorities are probably blocking the participation of Belarusian opposition and civil society in all possible common events in the EU.
The only answer was that Belarus is now an accomplice of Russia's military aggression, and this explains such aspects of this situation.
Ukrainian and Belarusian developers have presented a video game where players can beat Putin and Lukashenko.
The initial purpose of the game is to give people a chance to vent at least some of the negative emotions.
Thousands of residents across Russia are living without heating.
It is so hard to live now. Impossible.
Belarusians are indignant about media reports that Ukraine has been blocking the democratic forces of Belarus on international platforms. The celebration of the anniversary of the uprising of 1863, which is key for Belarusian history that took place in Warsaw, provoked a whole range of reactions. Belarusian leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya wasn't given a possibility to speak, and Volodymyr Zelensky didn't mention Belarus in his congratulations. Is Ukraine really trying to prevent Belarus from building relations with the European Union? And what is the response of Europe?
Ukraine seems to be blocking the participation of Belarusian democratic leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya and the representatives of Belarusian society in joint events in Europe. This has been stated by the media Nasha Niva with reference to anonymous European diplomats. According to the report, this may be part of the backroom arrangements between Kiev and Alexander Lukashenko, or an attempt to guess the wishes of the latter. The Belarusian democratic forces themselves can point to only one case that could be an example of the alleged blocking. Valery Kavalowski, the representative of the United Transitional Cabinet in Foreign Affairs, mentions the recent celebration of the 160th anniversary of the uprising of 1863, which took place in Warsaw and caused an outrage among Belarusians.
The speech of the Belarusian speaker Svetlana Tikhanovskaya was absent from the program. The Belarusian flag was not raised, there was no opportunity to lay a Belarusian wreath, and Belarus wasn't mentioned in the speech made by the Ukrainian ambassador on behalf of Volodymyr Zelensky.
The uprising of 1863 in the territories of modern Belarus, Ukraine, Poland and Lithuania against Russian rule is one of the key moments in Belarusian history. Its leader, Kastus Kalinowski, became a cult figure for Belarusian society.
Our ancestors took a very active part. My great-grandfather and great-great-grandfather participated in the uprising, were repressed, their property was confiscated, but they revived and raised their children in the same tradition. Although in Soviet times it was quite difficult. In my family before Perestroika, it wasn't mentioned that the ancestors had participated in this rebellion.
At the same time, the president of Poland and Lithuania clearly noted the role of Belarus and Belarusians at the celebrations of the uprising. After the event, Valery Kavalowski expressed his position to the ambassador of Ukraine and Poland, noting that such a lack of mention of Belarus is inappropriate because the role of Belarusians was central in the events.
He didn't dispute the claims and arguments I made. The only answer was that Belarus is now an accomplice of Russia's military aggression, and this explains such aspects of this situation.
Other political actors in the international arena can unequivocally tell the difference between the regime of Alexander Lukashenko, who acted as Putin's satellite in the war, and the Belarusians themselves. Svetlana Tikhanovskaya has been recognized as the national leader of Belarus. The absence of Tikhanovskaya's speech at the celebrations in Warsaw was balanced by the presence of Belarusians and Belarusian flags, as well as a wreath from the Belarusian diaspora. But it is being rumored that Ukraine is blocking the Belarusian presence.
I don't think that Ukraine specifically blocks the participation of Tikhanovskaya in diplomatic events. It is actually a matter of diplomatic protocol. In order to participate in diplomatic events, you need to have a special status.
Being precise, Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya has had the status to participate in bilateral and multilateral international meetings from 2020, and she has been continuing her diplomatic activities since then successfully. The Lithuanian side does not comment on Ukraine's actions, but clearly emphasizes its own position.
Our position was, remains, and will remain to support Belarusian opposition, who is in Lithuania, who is in Poland, elsewhere. We will continue supporting any way we can, politically, financially, and that's our pledge that we made in 2020, and we're sticking to it.
Apparently, wartime was the reason for the censorship of history during the celebrations of the uprising. But even if the Belarusian democratic forces were blocked at the celebrations, it is more important for the United Transitional Cabinet to continue to participate in the initiatives where the common future of Europe is determined, for example, in the European political community, which the Cabinet is trying to join.
Ukrainian and Belarusian developers have created an anti-stress game called Kick the Poo, which allows you to beat up Putin and Lukashenko. You can fight them hand-to-hand, shoot them down with a javelin or an assault rifle, or throw grenades at them. What other characters will appear in the app, and how have the Russian users reacted to it? Our colleagues report from Kyiv.
Here we choose Lukashenko, and we can, for example, use... You can do the same with Putin.
Volodymyr from Kiev is demonstrating the Kick the Poo game, where you can literally beat the characters of Vladimir Putin and Alexander Lukashenko.
We have the following characters: Chmonya, a partially mobilized military reservist, Kadyrovets, Kadyrov's follower, Putin and Lukashenko. Choose a character, then choose your weapon and have fun.
The arsenal ranges from a simple pistol to the American Javelin portable anti-tank missile system. The idea of the game emerged in March 2022, when the young men were helping the Territorial Defense Forces to defend the capital. One of the developers recalls that it was a kind of a stress relief response to Russia's military invasion of Ukraine.
The initial purpose of the game is to give people a chance to vent at least some of the negative emotions, that is, the anger we all have accumulated.
The game was developed by both Ukrainian and Belarusian programmers who had to leave the country because of repression.
It took us about a week from the moment we came up with the idea to the start of the work. We recruited the team through social media, from people we hadn't known before. The best part is that everyone agreed to work for free.
The app has been developed remotely via Skype. The first version of Kick the Poo was ready in less than a month, but publishing the game in mobile app stores for other users was a real challenge.
We probably exchanged hundreds of letters with the support team and moderators of the stores. We submitted more than 24 appeals, but in the end, after 4 months, we managed to publish the game.
To make matters worse, after the game was published, there were many negative comments from Russian chatbots.
We are still getting offensive emails, but this only spurs us on, energizes us, and makes us strive for more.
All proceeds from the game, you can turn off advertising for $1 if you wish, go to support the armed forces of Ukraine and those affected by the war. The developers are encouraging users to participate in discussions about the game on their Telegram channel, kickthepoo_chat, so that they will be able to work on application updates and possible new character development. They have already mentioned that the characters of the most notorious Russian propagandists, Vladimir Solovyov and Olga Skabayeva, will appear in the game.
Residents of Russia are freezing in their own apartments. People are forced to sleep in their outdoor clothing, put bottles with hot water in their beds, and pay large money for electricity to heat their homes with portable heaters. Russian President Vladimir Putin used the same scenario to frighten Europe last fall when he turned off gas. But the threats materialized in Russia itself. Russian security forces are looking for someone to be blamed for the collapse of communal services. Meanwhile, the state continues to raise tariffs set on housing and utilities.
It is so hard to live now. Impossible.
Pensioner Galina Morozova lives in the city of Engels, Saratov region, which is located in the southeast of the European part of Russia, with a population of almost 2.5 million inhabitants. Not far from the house of the elderly woman, there is one of the largest air bases in the world. This is where military bombers of the long-range aviation of the Russian Air Force take off to destroy civilian objects in Ukraine, almost on a daily basis. No one bombs the region in response, but life here is far from comfortable.
Here's one blanket, here's the second one, here's the third one. I sleep here. I don't turn on the lights, I economize. I spend all the money to pay for heating.
The woman is complaining about the constant cold in the apartment with tears in her eyes. She wears felt boots and a downy shawl at home, sleeps under 3 blankets, and spends almost the entire pension on utility bills. The cold has exacerbated her chronic diseases, but she doesn't have enough money for medicines.
Cheap gas, cheap electricity and water, economy that can withstand thousands of sanctions. Time to move to Russia. Don't delay. Winter is coming.
Such commercials were promoted by Russian state propaganda. The videos hint to the inhabitants of Europe that this year they will freeze without Russian energy resources. Gas blackmail of Western politicians was the main lever used by Vladimir Putin throughout his entire presidency. However, this year many countries have found alternative ways of supply, and the winter itself has been warm. But severe frosts came to Russia, reaching up to minus 63 degrees Celsius in some regions. Meanwhile, many Russians continue to heat their homes with wood, coal, heat guns or gas cylinders, which have been constantly exploding in various cities of Russia since the beginning of December. This results in many injuries and deaths. The program of additional gasification of regions launched on behalf of Putin in 2021 was actually stopped after the outbreak of the war with Ukraine.
We close every room to keep warm. We turn on the gas stove in the kitchen to keep warm. We also use electric ovens for heating. One of them has already broken down this winter.
Saratov resident Galina Ermakova, whose house has gas, is forced to wear outdoor clothing at home. The room temperature is a little over 10 degrees Celsius. She tries to warm herself using the gas stove in the kitchen during the day. And before going to bed, Galina fills empty plastic bottles with hot tap water. This is how she warms her bed. The piping in most Russian houses was installed in the times of the USSR and has never been replaced. Hot water simply does not reach the apartments and it flows into the ground instead because of the corroded pipeline along the way.
In November we paid 3,269 rubles. In December we paid 4,547 rubles. Well, I understand 100, 200 rubles increase, but not more than 1,000. Somehow it's not very nice.
The state demands to pay more and more for utilities, which in fact do not exist. Elena Panova, a pensioner from the Far East, compares the numbers on her last 2 heating bills. The monthly payment increased by 14 euros and amounted to more than 60 euros, with an average pension in the country of 220 euros. And in January, the cost of utilities in Russia will increase by about 10%.
We have elected this government. We go to the polls. Why don't they meet our needs? It is impossible to live like this.
These are the words of a resident of one of the largest cities in the country, Kazan. She addresses the Russian authorities, also complaining about the problems with heating in the apartment. Icy heating pipes, people freezing in their houses, power outages. This is the picture of life in Russia this winter. According to various estimates, the general deterioration of the public infrastructure in the Russian regions reaches from 70 to 90%. Increase in tariffs is not enough to replace thousands of kilometers of corroded pipes. The problem could be solved through a national program with public investment. But Vladimir Putin prefers to spend budget money on the war against Ukraine.
That's all for today. Eastern Europe Review will be back next week. I am Sergei Pelesa. Thank you for being with us. Please keep watching TVP World and stand with Ukraine.